All right, it's 11 o'clock on the dot, Los Angeles time, 2 o'clock East Coast time, and I think it's drinking time basically everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Um, uh, I'm waiting for people to sort of log in, so we're going to normally take the 2 to 3 minutes that we wait and sort of chit chat. We also have one of our presenters who we're just waiting for here. But in the meantime, I thought this would be a good opportunity to figure out which of our presenters' backgrounds has the absolute most going on. And I'm going to have to say, I'm going to give it to Chase, who's a close runner-up to Lee there, because he's in his, is it your in-laws' basement?
My in-laws' basement. See this nice little hole in the ceiling above the treadmill? I'm a little too high. I'm too tall for the ceiling, so
that's classic.
I think it looks great, man.
Yeah,
looks great.
Thanks.
That's good. And I appreciate you, like you brushed your hair and everything, but then you still put the hat on, like, you know.
Yeah, put the makeup on, did it all for you, man.
Is brushing your teeth a requirement for a webinar, do you think?
No,
I don't think so.
As we all know, having met with you, Michael, it's not for any kind of.
I got to go get my tequila. It's right over there. Can I just go get it? It's literally 10 feet from me, 5 feet.
No problem. Okay, we're almost there on people. I'm just waiting a few more minutes here, and we'll get started then. I think we're now at 11:02, so I want to be sensitive to people's time. So listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining today. We're super excited to have you all here. We've got a great group of folks that have come on board to give us some perspective and advice on tactical choices that we can make right now to help get ourselves ready for a post-COVID world. I'm going to have just a quick introduction as I sort of walk through folks here to start with. And I'm going to actually go to the slide here. We're going to do quick introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you know, the market has evolved around us real quick with some of the timing and changes. Then we're going to get into it and really sort of talk about the solutions that you can deploy, and then have some time at the end for Q&A. I do want to make sure that people use the Q&A tool in the webinar, in the Zoom thing. That's where you can submit your questions. If you submit them in chat, I might see them or might not, but I certainly will see them in the Q&A tool. And there'll be a poll that'll come out a little later on that I'd love you guys to all answer. And so as we sort of introduce the folks, let's start with Mike Beckerman. Mike is the founder and CEO of CREtech, a leader in the commercial real estate space, both thought leader and a guy who kind of connects and knows everybody. So Mike, thank you for joining us today and supporting the program. We've got Ryan Shumfield. Ryan is a security expert with Raz Security and Raz Watch. They operate a very robust security consulting practice that helps companies figure out exactly what they want to do from a security posture perspective across all disciplines, physical as well as cyber, and run a GSOC, a Global Security Operations Center, as part of Raz Watch, which handles all the remote management and capabilities that you would need to remotely basically manage a global enterprise. So Ryan, it's great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Chase is the CEO of HQO. HQO is one of the leading tenant amenity technology providers in the marketplace today. He works closely with large building portfolios on the commercial real estate side across the globe, and is deploying technology to help the tenants and the landlords communicate better, run and operate more efficient buildings. And in this post-COVID world, that communication becomes incredibly relevant given all the dynamic changes that are happening at properties around the world. So Chase, thank you for being here. Leo Dess is the editor and publisher of Inside Access Control. This is a project that he started recently that has taken on tremendous momentum in the physical security space. Inside Access Control, you can go to IAC. What's the website URL there, Lee?
InsideAccessControl.com.
That makes sense. And so he is a thought leader in the physical security space, and we'll be talking about visitor management, as he is also a leader in that space. So thank you, Lee, for joining us. Adam Seawall is the head of marketing for Density.io. Density is a sort of very popular occupancy management technology, people counter in layman's speak, and their business has really sort of been picking up over the last couple of years and become super relevant now that managing occupancy in buildings is more important than ever. So Adam, thank you for joining us. And then shortly we'll have Kip joining us. Kip is with Landmore. They are a well-known system integrator that installs automatic door openers and a host of other technologies within buildings, and can talk a little bit about what it's like to actually get that technology up and running and going. So with that, I'm going to move on to the framework slide that I show. Now, I show this in the beginning of every single one of these webinars, and the reason is just to sort of set the tone, which we are going through a lot of change in the marketplace today. We know that right now we're in this phase one of sort of the post-COVID reaction where we are all sheltering in place. We know that phase two is upon us. This is that time when we start to get back to work, but social distancing is a very relevant and meaningful part of how we do that because we're pre-vaccine, we're pre-immunization, and the decisions we make today not only have to impact and affect how we react to the disease, while infection rates are still variable and immunity is not available, but also how we respond to the long term. So I think part of what you're going to see today is a lot of the technologies and a lot of the choices that you can make today in this phase two timeframe can impact how you'll have a long-term response to any kind of pandemic readiness in the future. We also talk about that there's a lot of political and emotional reactions that are happening as we can kind of see today as policies are getting talked about in the marketplace, and this pendulum swing is happening. So one thing I wanted to add is the government has now just put out sort of guidelines for get back to work for all phases, and I think the employer component becomes incredibly relevant to the conversation we're having here. So these are the current guidelines that have come out. This is the political response to what also will have an emotional component. So as you think about the guidelines for social distancing, temperature check, sanitation, business travel, use of disinfection for any kind of common surface, the technologies and the concepts that we bring to bear now become super, super relevant because it's not just about what the compliance standards become, it's about how people react and whether they actually want to feel safe and go back to the workplace. This is basically a funny image I sort of found. I don't know whose it is, but basically this is what I think it's going to end up looking like in all of our offices soon. We're basically just going to be bubble people. With that, let's get on with it. And we're going to start off with the first solution, which is access control. I happen to be pretty good at access control, so I'm going to go through a little bit of what the market looks like and what you can do today for hands-free access. I think the goal is to try to reduce touching of any kind of surface. So if your mobile phone, the supercomputer that's in your pocket is your credential, is your key, it is your app that you can interact both with the locking mechanism, with the building, with the elevator, with the parking garage, it becomes super relevant. And you've got lots of different mobile apps that are out there from various access control providers. I think at the bare minimum, you can find apps that just replace your badge. And then of course, you can find apps like ours that do a whole lot of other things as well. The whole goal, of course, is to be able to press a button to unlock a door. And if it's connected to an automatic door opener, you don't even have to touch the handle. And this is, I think, where we want to go with a no touch, no germ kind of environment. The challenge, of course, is how do you make that work across all the different parts of the building, whether it's parking or turnstiles or elevators or lobbies. And this is a concern most people have. Nobody really wants to touch, the button in the elevator or pull the handle open on the door. So for parking garages, it's touch-free access. You're touching your phone. You're in your car. You don't have to go, take a ticket or do anything. For this turnstiles, it's kind of the same thing. Your phone is your key. You walk up, you basically swipe it across the top, and you don't have to, do anything else. And then for elevators, again, the technology they're working on right now means that you won't even have to touch the button in the elevator. It'll auto unlock basically the floor that you have access to, and then you'll be able to select the floor that you want, either through a destination dispatch elevator integration or the ability to support relay-based elevators. Visitor management systems as well in the building become super relevant, and having guest passes that are on your phone as a way to quickly unlock access to that building removes the need for people to hand things back and forth to one another and allows you to manage occupancy. Uh, Apps like what Chase is going to talk about in the tenant amenity space allow buildings to really have a comprehensive communication with their tenants in real time for any of the dynamic changes that are going on in the building, and can include, from a single app experience perspective, the access control piece. So we're fully integrated within HQO, and you can kind of see that that single app download experience reduces the friction that tenants have to put onto the landlords have to put onto the tenants to enable this kind of technology. Integration with video surveillance systems as we sort of bring thermal heat detection on board for temperature reading, or as we're looking at occupancy management and tracking, becomes super relevant. This is the same for connecting to occupancy sensors as well. So an access control system that's smart, that's cloud-based, that's next gen, that can connect to all this becomes very relevant. And the deployment complexity and the cost is something that I want everybody to kind of stress a little bit, so people know, how do I budget for this? And so, certainly for our system, you have to buy the readers that get mounted on the doors. You have to buy a panel that gets mounted in the IT closet. It connects over the wiring that's already in place, or if it's a new build or new construction, that wiring needs to get put in, as well as the electrified door strike and the locking mechanism on the door. Then the software is all in the cloud. And so just some general guidelines. It costs for a brand new door to install it with a full on, electrified door strike, access control system, reader, all that, about $2,500 a door. And you're looking at about $200 a year of OpEx for the software upkeep, maintenance, and so forth. If you're replacing an old system, it's more like about $1,500 a door to put a system like Openpath in. And the install complexity is not much. You're placing an old system, you can get a base building done in about 2 days. If you're putting a brand new system in where you're having to sort of pull wires and do a lot more, you're looking at about a week. So that kind of gives us a sense there, kind of where we're at. And I'm going to then hand it over now to Kip for automatic door openers. So Kip, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent, great. And I mentioned Kip's with Landmore. They're a well-established system integration firm that deploys all kinds of systems into buildings, puts automatic door openers in, and a host of other technologies, including access control, video surveillance, and the like. And so he was kind enough to join us today to sort of bring some of his expertise to bear. And so if you want, I'll just sort of go on to this first slide maybe, Kip, if you want to sort of do this, I'll sort of toggle through these two videos of what it's like with automatic door openers and mobile, and then, let you sort of talk and tell me when to click.
Yeah, you're good there. So for the automatic operator, what you find on a lot of public buildings is the fact that it's the door hardware that's integrated with the operator. Typically, you find handicap buttons either mounted on a pedestal out front or on the wall beside the door, and typically it's on the left side of the door, so that you're not opening the door on your side. So when you get into the Openpath integration and you tie it together with your phone, I don't need the paddle now, the handicap paddle on the outside, because the reader is going to pick me up, and then the integration between the Openpath and the automatic operator will engage, so that there's basically no other devices needed to integrate that operator or move that door open for you. Same is true on the way out. Typically there's a paddle on the inside that you would push to get out of the building, or if you had a reader on the outside or on the inside that was for like card out or whatever, you could use that to pick you up and move the door at the same time. So you can do it one of two ways. You could actually put a paddle on the inside and not have a reader in there, or you can put a reader on the inside and have it pick you up to exit.
And Kip, that's a good point, because we've seen a lot of folks wanting to really track and manage occupancy. And so if you have an exit reader, one on the inside, and you ask people to sort of badge out as they're leaving, either with the mobile credential or with their card, you can have a much more accurate tracking of who's in and out of the building. And if you combine that with some of the people counting technology that we'll talk about later from density, you really have a sense of who's authorized to be there and who's not.
Correct. Yeah, no, and that really is starting to be a big deal now for what we're dealing with in today's environment.
Yeah. So maybe Kip, if you could jump in a little bit, as you know, a lot of people have their doors in place. This is an existing built environment, and they're wondering, how hard is it to actually upgrade a, hinged door, a revolving door, stuff that's already in place to an automatic opener with, hands-free access control. Is this something that's going to just break the bank and take forever, or how's that all work?
No, it won't. I mean, if you really want to go to, say, from your PDF here, your single line drawing, you could take where it says 6 and plug in any type of operator in there you want. Some doors are high usage doors, so you're going to want to pick an operator that has a very high count for it. Some operators are more for a door that's not all that frequently used, maybe just as a handicap access point. So for the operator that you pick, you want to pick it for the right application, because there is a cost associated with those. And on the slide, it kind of shows you that for a lower end, low energy door, you're to tie it all in to card access and integrate it, you're talking probably around $5,000. The thing that you have to be careful about is the hardware that is on the door existing. So that looks like it has a panic device on it. So to integrate that in, you would have to put a strike in the frame. That way, when you badge, you fire the strike, because most doors in our world today have to be positively latched for fire and smoke. So that panic bar, that door has to be positively latched. So you put a strike in the frame so it's always latched. And then when I badge, I fire the strike, and then the relay will then tell the operator to open, so that it unlatches basically the door from the frame, and you can do it hands-free that way. So if you're coming out and the operator's on the door, you could just push the panic bar, which also pulls the bolt in, and then you can freely leave, or you can set the same system up to integrate from the inside.
And so, in terms of like having this sort of put into your building today, like what do you tend to see if a building or even a tenant wants to sort of get one of these systems deployed and put in? Are they putting them on all the doors, or is it really more just the high frequency usage doors where you're going to get a lot of touching? And what is the kind of timing to put one of these things in?
What we see Arizona, Nevada, a lot of is building owners, property managers make their buildings compliant to ADA. So what that means is their building is set up to accommodate handicapped people. So every one door of that building has a handicap operator on it. And it may be, at the front door, it may be one leaf of the front door. It may be a hallway door. Typically what you see though is there's 1 or 2 doors on every complex that has an ADA operator on it, which means it has card access and all of that to accommodate those folks. We also find on biparting doors or sliders, we see that becoming more prevalent now, just due to the fact that the doors bipart when you badge to go in, so you can get a lot more people through the opening.
Gotcha. Obviously, a lot more construction work involved in taking a hinge door area and trying to move that into a sliding door. But it sounds like from a cost perspective, you're looking at $5 to $7 grand, sort of on the low end, to upgrade a legacy sort of swinging door or double door, and maybe $7 to $10 or $7 to $15 grand on the higher end to upgrade a heavier door. Is that about right?
Correct. Yeah. And you'll see that application, whether it's a swinger or a slider, on almost every medical complex building that you run into.
All right. Well, look, this is great. Really good advice from someone who does this all day long. And so, Kip, super appreciative of you coming on. And if you could stay on, that'd be great, because I think we're going to get a bunch of questions around this. So I'll jump forward to our next section here. And we're going to talk about temperature tracking cameras. And I'm going to introduce Ryan here. So Ryan, you are up.
All right. Good morning. So before we get into specific camera products, number one, I'm not endorsing specific products here. I think it's the concept of temperature identification, but really I wanted to make clear to people that before you run out and buy a camera that claims to do temperature detection, that you understand really what its value is and what it doesn't do. Because over the past few weeks, we've had nonstop calls with folks saying, hey, we're buying a thermal camera and we're going to install it at the front door. But the real question is, okay, assume for a second that you're buying the right product and that it works. What are you going to do with that when the camera detects that something's not what it's supposed to be? So there's really a process and a procedure that has to drive how you leverage that technology. There's probably some amount of configuration that has to be done in your entrance or lobby-way to, one, set up the right environment for that camera to work in optimal conditions. But there's also, for a lot of companies, a cultural component of, what is the culture for your building, for your organization? Do you want your lobby to feel like a TSA checkpoint, or do you still want it to have that, if you're a Class A creative building, do you still want to have that feel and that culture and that environment while still being able to maintain the safety of the workforce and the occupants? A misconception is that there's fever detecting cameras, COVID-19 detecting cameras. There's not. The capability of the cameras that are out there today are really looking at surface temperature in an ideal environment for that device. So it's not really saying that somebody has a fever or doesn't have a fever. It's just saying that the surface temperature of this object is approximately X. And there's a whole bunch of variations or a whole bunch of things that can actually mean. But I think it's also important to recognize that it's not a full solution, right? You can have plenty of people who are asymptomatic that may have the infection, that may not have a fever or a high temperature. And you can have people who, for whatever reason, they just came in from exercising, they've been standing in the sun. There's a whole bunch of reasons that a camera or device might show that somebody has an elevated temperature that may not actually have a fever. And so it's important that you have the processes and the SOPs in place to deal with all of that. Communication of these new protocols are going to be key to all of the building occupants and employees, so that they understand what you're doing, what you're not doing, what's going to happen if somebody actually triggers a detection system. Privacy concerns with medical information, but as well as once somebody triggers an alarm, what happens? What is the secondary screening process for all of them to do some type of validation? Are they immediately sent home, et cetera? And then the lobby reconfiguration to really accomplish what that program is going to look like.
Okay, great.
Hey, Ryan, it's Mike. If I could interrupt, that was great. How would you recommend that somebody that's looking at this category vets against all these scammers that are out there, that either you're getting emails from, or you're seeing it on LinkedIn, or you're reading about it, where everybody's got the secret sauce that's going to vet people as they come through for the virus, et cetera, et cetera. Any sort of just do's and don'ts or best practices that the people should be looking for to weed out the scammers?
So there's a lot of stuff coming to the market very quickly, and you'll actually see in one of my last slides, there's a product I'm going to show you where it says we're still trying to figure out who the manufacturer actually is. And I wouldn't normally put something like that on a slide, but I did it for that purpose, because it's a technology that, if it works, is really cool. The form factor is great and buildings are going to love it. But the vetting that needs to go into actually looking at that product, where it comes from, the cyber what it means from a cybersecurity perspective when you select a product. Is the product connected to anything else? Is it a standalone system? You really have to look at all of that holistically, and then certainly there's going to be aesthetic decisions for the building too. You know, some of these products are quite large and in your face. There's other ones that are more compact and can fit into different aesthetics. So I think there's a lot that goes into the answer to that question, but I would definitely say, you know, don't take the marketing at its face value. If anybody's calling their product fever detection or COVID detection, I would just hit delete. Hopefully that answers your question. So I talked about this briefly already, but just from a cyber perspective, make sure you know what you're plugging into your network. People are very quickly jumping to buy products that, you know, solve or seemingly solve a problem that they're having without doing the proper vetting that they as a company would ordinarily do with a new technology. So, you know, just slow down a little bit and pay attention if this is something that you're planning on using as a connected product. The other piece to look at is, is this something that you want to integrate into your Openpath or your access control system so that, you know, if there's a detection, something happens with locking a door or restricting access? Or is this something where you're going to have it just monitored locally at each entrance by staff or remotely in an operations center? So really, you know, again, that holistic look at it. Next slide, please. The market's growing very quickly, as I said. Let's just get into some of the installation stuff, and then we'll talk about products. Here's something that was released by Mobotics. MSRP is $6,000. It includes the software to use this just as a standalone product at a single entrance. The cost will go up for any integrations into video management systems or any of the other security platform that you may have at your building. This one's interesting because it is a SIP endpoint, and as you can see, it has an integrated speaker and microphone. So there actually is an ability, whether it's after hours or for lesser trafficked entrances, to have this monitored remotely or have a remote operations center monitor multiple buildings at once and be able to communicate through this device to somebody who may have triggered an alert. This is obviously a larger form factor and more in-your-face option. So FLIR, industry leader in thermal technology, they're actually seeking FDA clearance for some of their products for this. They have a few lines of products for this type of application that range between about 4,000 and 15,000 MSRP. Again, some of these like this could be operated offline by somebody operating it as a handheld device, which wouldn't require any install from an integrator. It would require a headcount for somebody to operate it, which long-term is probably a much more expensive way to go. But it is an option that you could deploy very quickly, either as an interim solution or if you had a standing guard force and you weren't worried about that headcount. It does also require more human interaction, which is a concern from an infection standpoint. Next slide, please. So this is a product. It's $10,000 MSRP. It's not meant to integrate. It's standalone, but it does include the software. It operates offline. So once you download the software to the workstation at the entranceway, that's it. It doesn't have to be connected to the network. It is running about a 3-week lead time currently, and I say ish because that seems to change hourly with a lot of the producers of these types of products. Naturally, they're in pretty high demand. Next. All right, so here's the one where we're investigating the root manufacturer. So this one basically looks like an iPad or a tablet. It's a really nice aesthetic. It's supposedly, and I say supposedly because I haven't validated it yet, integrates with access control, has a facial recognition component that supposedly you can register your workforce while they're wearing a mask and while they're not wearing a mask, and uses multiple camera technologies within that tablet to do surface temperature readings. It's really cool from a environmental and aesthetic component. It is a product out of China, and so figuring out who's actually making it and the security of the system behind it is what we're currently looking into. But aesthetically, it's really cool, and the price point's phenomenal.
Very cool. Well, that's great stuff, Ryan. In final, what are we looking at from a cost perspective here?
Yeah, so generally, it's going to be similar to installing cameras in a building, which we generally tell people to budget about $1,200 per device for the cable pull and installation. It's a quick process, probably 1 to 2 days. The operational piece of how you're going to implement it is really the bigger lead time than the actual installation itself.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the excellent advice, and we'll open it up at the end to questions on this. Let's move on to people counters and occupancy management. So Adam, if you want to dive in, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, James and Mike, thanks for inviting me and having me participate. Thanks everyone for the time. Just go to the next slide, I guess, James. So yeah, I included this picture because if you asked me what I thought of this picture on February 1 of this year, I would have said, man, that looks crowded and kind of uncomfortable, but I certainly wouldn't think it's a health risk. So this is just to kind of highlight that a lot has changed in the past couple of months. And as we've started to work with our customers and help figure out how we can help out, we're working with tenants and landlords to help manage what their return to work policies should or could be. But we're also working with a lot of customers who are still at work. So manufacturers, warehouses, essential retailers, and things like that. We build a sensor that looks like this. It goes above a doorway. I won't get into the weeds on how the technology works, but the 3 things that we do incredibly well is we produce an extremely highly accurate count of individuals walking into a space. We do so anonymously, so we don't capture any PII. And we serve that data, and we make that data available in purpose-built software and an API in real time, as well as in trend analytics. And so there's a number of different use cases for that. One of which is preventing tailgating. So we have an integration with Openpath, where we're able to produce a highly accurate count, compare that to the Openpath data that's being read by the Openpath reader, and detect when someone is coming into a space, a secure location, a secured access control door, without presenting their credentials. So here's a quick demo of that integration.
And the goal here is to be able to track occupancy. So she sneaks in behind him. The density unit catches it, knows that just because he credentialed in, we know who he is, and it can even set off an alarm there, as well as obviously alerts. So you guys have alerts in the system as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah, you can get an SMS alert. We can push it back into if you're using a system such as Openpath. We can serve those alerts to your security staff. They can take a look. We can even start pushing that to your video surveillance system, time stamping when those events happen, so you can go back and revisit. Really, the benefit there is the accuracy of the system, reduces false alarms, and gives security staff confidence in the system.
Well, when you have a mandated occupancy level in a building or in a space, this becomes incredibly important, right? Because it's not just about the credentialed user who comes in, but it's about being understand if somebody else followed that person in. So now if you had a limit of 10 people in the space and 10 people credential in, but 3 people kind of walk in with them, you're over your capacity and you need an alert. You need to be able to have an audit trail. You need to know what's going on because those are the new compliance standards that are coming out. I kind of see that here with your occupancy monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, I think the use cases that are coming to the fore with our current customer base, if they have folks at work who are essential services providers, there are a lot of concerns around workplace safety. People really didn't think about occupancy of space in such urgency as they currently do. And then folks who are kind of crafting how are we going to bring employees back to the office. Everyone's been impacted by the current crisis, and there are varying levels of anxiety about coming back into an office. And so with our system, what you're able to do is, the sensor goes above a doorway. You can measure building level, floor level. You could even measure specific room level occupancy, and expose that data in people per square foot. So a lot of our customers are looking at phasing employees in different waves, ensuring that a floor doesn't go over an intended capacity. So you're giving people the room to be able to practice spatial distancing, temporal distancing. So yeah, this is a quick look at the dashboard here. You can see, you can get, you know, if you had a 10,000 square foot space, we could tell you how many people are in there right now, as well as over time.
Hey, Adam, it's Mike. Quick question for you. So this is ideal for, obviously, the use case that you're showing is for a single tenant space. Is this able to be deployed in a multi-tenant environment, or in common areas, or people come through the building?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, something that's coming up a lot is lobbies. How do we manage lobbies where we have a multi-tenant location? We're controlling our own space and our own policies as it pertains to workplace safety. But if I send an employee through the lobby and there's a bunch of other people from other tenants, you know, what does that mean? So to be honest, we haven't figured quite out how to work with those in those types of scenarios, but we are talking with owners, operators on those shared spaces. How can we surface this data both to them so they're clear of what's going on within their buildings, but also to their tenants? So what James pulled up here, this is just a quick snapshot of kind of the data that you get in the platform. So we have many customers are starting to look to actually monitor and enforce kind of an occupancy limit as they bring people back to the office, or if they're running a warehouse. That, you know, we're working with folks, large enterprises that have large warehouse facilities in a break room. You know, they want to make sure that their employees feel that they're taking a technology approach to ensuring that they're safe and not exposing themselves to being too close together. So we've got mobile applications where you can do SMS push notifications, get notified when that space goes over its intended capacity, and take action and make sure that you're communicating that back to employees. And I think that last point, I think, is something, it's common thread that we see throughout everyone we're speaking to these days. Communicating the steps you're taking and making them credible to regain and gain the trust of your employees is a critical kind of pillar of the policies that we're seeing be put in place. And so just to double back, we are working with you know, owner operators, as well as you know, the retail tenants, you know, grocers, you know, some other retailers that are looking to come back online to manage their stores and that space a lot better from an occupancy standpoint. So ensuring that, you know, Walmart recently announced that they're limiting their store traffic to 20% of the intended capacity. There's really, really strong uptick in demand for those use cases, and ultimately we just kind of want to help out and ensure that people have the data they need to keep their spaces safe.
Yeah, and one of the people online asked, you know, can you just deploy this on each floor of a building to sort of determine if there's a global building report that, you know, allows you to sort of know, okay, hey, I know my density on this building, I have one outside of the elevators, and I know who's sort of coming in, right?
Yeah, exactly right. That's a very common use case, building and floor level occupancy. All that data rolls up in the dashboard. You're able to monitor those locations. Typically just goes above the elevator bays and the stairwells onto that floor.
Yeah.
So in terms of like pricing and how to get started, it's a PoE, standard PoE device. There's a cost for the hardware, a cost for the software. That software includes things like all software, firmware upgrades, the system, so it's always secure and up to date. You know, technical support and customer success, all future feature upgrades and things like that. So the integrations like with great partners like Openpath. Pricing's on our website. We work with resellers and installers to get you up and running quickly. The deployment is very straightforward. It's a PoE device, so cable run is typically the largest portion of that cost. So that $1,200 that was referenced prior for camera, we see anywhere between $500 and $1,200 to get a unit up and running. If you're just buying a couple units, facility staff can do that as well. It's very straightforward, but that's how pricing works.
Yeah, and we got some questions about elevators, and so we can kind of feel that now for a moment. In that, you know, the density device is one that you can certainly put in an elevator lobby, and that'll give you overall occupancy for that lobby. If you put it over each threshold for the elevator, you can certainly track who's coming in and out. Most of the time, there's not a data connection in the elevator unless there's already a data camera in there. And so, you know, you're going to be looking at some expensive wiring to pull data, you know, cables into the elevator itself. So you would probably want to have, you know, the density unit on the outside. In all cases, it can tie into the access control system. So, you know, the access control reader that's on the inside of the elevator it certainly track, you know, the people that are credentialed to go to different floors. And obviously, if you have a destination dispatch elevator, you're going to have a little bit more accurate sort of people tracking and counting rather than sort of a relay base where you have to push the button on each floor. But Openpath is working closely with both our people counter partners as well as our elevator technology partners to come up with a system that you can deploy soon that will actually allow you to sort of track occupancy with an elevator. What we've actually seen some people doing is they're actually putting masking tape on the ground for now, and they're literally sectioning off part of the elevator to say, hey, it fits 4 people. If you're in your square, you're fine. If your elevator door opens and you're not in your square, well, don't get in. So Adam, look, thank you. That's great feedback and advice. We'll keep jumping on here. So if we could, Lee, tell us a little bit about the visitor management space.
No, I appreciate it. All right. So most of you have probably seen visitor management, and it's really, if you look at the evolution, it's having its moment currently right now, because it's gone from what has really been primarily, if you call it non-enterprise, high security side, where you've seen adoption there from both back of the house at the dock and then at the front desk, but and high security and the more enterprise, regular, if you would, business, it's really been primarily just taking a clipboard, if you would, that you had before and making it digital, and was seen kind of, at the beginning as a way to just jazz up the front desk a bit, right? But now, because now you have to understand where knowns and unknowns are coming, you're starting to see a pre-COVID and post. So go to the next slide. I reached out to, go to the next one for me. I reached out to 4 companies in this space, to the CEOs, and actually asked them, well, how has your business changed prior to now? And you'll see kind of a theme that goes across this, right? So before it was about branding, about looking good, badges, logbooks. It was about business efficiencies. And then you saw about, it was more about convenience, right? That seemed to be the main drivers of adoption that was here. So primarily nice to haves, to where afterwards you're starting to see terms like health and safety measures come up and touchless. You're starting to see the communication and notifications become important. You're seeing business continuity as terms that are being used. And then the universal risks that you see around how to manage visitors and employees. So primarily on the visitor management side, its name was called visitor management. So it never really involved a lot of the employee side of what you had before. But now it's starting to really move away from that and become the sort of known and unknowns. And then the workflows that are built around that. So then what you do. So tying these into the different systems that we talked about, whether it's with access control like you've seen, whether it's on the people counting, fever detection, the rest of it, because it could be a trigger of what's going to happen. Some of this is predominantly inside the lobby. We're starting to see and having conversations about how this is moving outside of the lobby. So it's one thing is the person comes into the space, they're already there. It's sort of like the first person that's at the desk, I guess they're okay to have a problem, but people are starting to try to figure out how do you get outside of that lobby so that your threat reduction is down and you have some awareness to know how to handle people in that case. Go to the next slide.
Yeah. So if you want, I wanted to
go ahead.
This looks like, because you mentioned that you can integrate it with access control. So the whole idea is to reduce touch points so that you're not handing a visitor pass to someone. You're reducing having people to be so close to each other. So this is just one of the integrations that we have that I kind of thought I'd show you. When you sign in at the kiosk, in this case with an Envoy system at the building lobby, you get an email right away that sort of says, hey, welcome to our site. And then it has a virtual pass. So you don't actually have to download and install the app if you're a visitor. You can actually just get a virtual pass powered by Openpath in your email, and then it's got access to those floors. So let me just kind of show you what that looks like. I've got the Envoy integration with the Mobile Credential. So I'm a visitor here. I just came over here. Our Openpath reader is installed right over here on the wall. You see that? And now all I have to do is just press this button right here. Boom, and it unlocks. I'm visiting, and now I have access. Yay! So the goal is obviously you want to reduce any need to touch anything, right? And so this makes it so your credential is your phone. But enough of that. Oh God, enough of that.
Yeah, it's hard to follow that, but I'll do my best. So as you think about things beyond the visitor management side that you have, that before, again, it's not just about getting a badge anymore and having a digital clipboard. You want to start to understand sort of what are the norms and the habit changes that of how your space works. Outbreak response strategies associated to this, that if somebody does show up and does trigger, what do you do? Management of essential visitors. So this is either, again, we talk a lot on the visitor side about at the front of the house, but you also have the back of the house. And if you have a loading dock, what do you do there as well? Because that's also another point to think about. Visitor operations procedures, again, beyond high sensitive areas and non-high sensitive areas, but actually taking a look at, like, where do you have a holding area where people go, visitor screening side of it. So beyond just the NDA that you have, so understanding a little bit more information, some workflows built around that. Have you been sick before or not? Things like that. Protecting employee health, business continuity. Again, we said contractor management, and then compliance. If you look at all those systems, when you take a look, there's a lot of variables that go into it, whether it's standalone or integrated. It's a lot of it's based on the size, how many locations you have, users, features, and then some of these flows that we talked about. You've seen any of them range from everywhere from $2,000 up to $20,000. A lot of them have annual contracts. Some have month to month. Then on top of that, you do have the ability for some of these to be their cloud deployments, where really all you need is an iPad and you can load the system onto it. So you don't actually have to have somebody go. But a lot of them are done through dealers, especially as the complexity goes up. And you need some professional services, or they do have installation, because a lot of them do go through dealers. And that ranges from a lot of the same pricing that you see now from regular installs. And typically they may be there already on site doing some other work that they have too. So you can dovetail this into the work that they're doing.
That's great. Well, thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
Good stuff there. And we've been getting questions come in that we'll sort of hit at the end there. So why don't we head over to Chase and tell us a little bit about what's going on with tenant communication, tenant amenity apps, and how those can help in a post-COVID world.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of, I think, what you're hearing from a lot of the group here, holistically property technology that is going to help people manage how we make our way back to work and make people feel safe is becoming a painkiller instead of a vitamin. So a lot of people viewed these things as a nice to have. Now what we're seeing is it's a need to have. So we're spending a lot of our time focusing on balancing the things that are ultimately safety oriented and a little bit heavier in terms of the tone, with also trying to do some things that are a little bit lighter and come as I think a nice distraction for folks in what has been a hard time. So some of the low lift stuff really is communicating about basic stuff in terms of what the new building policies, procedures are during the lockdowns and quarantines, what the cleaning schedules are, proof of deeper cleanings and communal areas, ultimately sharing resources if the tenant companies are looking for new or more thorough cleaning services. A lot of our clients, landlords, have been procuring a lot of services on behalf of the tenants and trying to have property management teams, helping them confirm that services are being delivered within the tenant suites. So, we're really focused on as we welcome people back to work, what it looks like in terms of how retail looks different, how people interact in buildings, and then what the technology suite that interacts with our platform, because we integrate with a number of different things, how the priorities change. So, when we talk to clients, we really are focusing now, next, later. So right now it's about communicating what you need to communicate on a daily basis. Information from local and city and state government has been very popular in a number of the tenant experience apps, that our landlords are sharing. Anything to do with resources at the property with regards to COVID has been getting a lot of engagement. Next, we think about ultimately how retail and office gets turned back on. We're partnering with a number of our landlords to enable employees and tenants to buy things like gift cards, and support the retailers in the building that have been hit really hard, to get them a little bit of cash flow. And they can do this in a touchless manner, obviously, since it's e-commerce, and that's something holistically that we're seeing. Point of purchase really needs to be touchless moving forward as much as it can be. One of the challenges we're hearing from our landlords is logistical challenges of if you're able to do kind of a rolling welcome back to work, say 25% occupancy, how you coordinate that across the different tenants. So we're starting to integrate with space management providers at a much higher rate. We're seeing people doing things like four corners and elevators. So you're going to need to throttle traffic in elevator systems. That's becoming more important. Anything touchless, we're now starting a number of projects. I think that was covered earlier here, so that you can pick the floor that you need to go to within the application. Some of this can be done through integrating with smart access control systems like Openpath, where they know what floor you have access to. A number of our clients do have amenity floors, so we're plugging into things that will enable you to pick certain floors. And then from a later perspective, one of the things that we're cautious about, and I think there's a number of ranging opinions on how much do we return to normal, but how much do we think some people are over-rotating on significant changes in user behavior. But one thing that we've heard a lot from a number of our clients is the concept of a building terms of service. So in order for them to mitigate certain risk within the building, do people coming in and out of the building agree to certain things? So answering surveys like, I have not been in contact with someone that is known to have COVID. In the short term, have you traveled to an area that has seen a COVID outbreak? Some things like that in order to help keep the building population safe. From a functionality standpoint, we're doing a number of things with e-commerce partners to really reignite retail. We think this is pretty critical to support small businesses and the retailers and a number of the properties. So this was a suite of features that we had previous to COVID, but obviously it's seen a bit of a tailwind. And what we've seen is landlords starting to think through ultimately how they can be supportive in order to support some of the retailers, obviously, have been hit the hardest, in order to help them actually come back, because there is a big question about how many of them will come back. Content, this one's probably the easiest and the most in play right now, but the things that I mentioned in terms of, are there new paths that you're asking people to, some doors are only in while others are out. Are there certain times and schedules that you can go to different areas of the property? Are there going to be staggered arrivals? Things like that. The community piece, it really does, the staggering of how people come in and ultimately how many people you let in certain communal areas needs to be a holistic effort at the building level. And then from a control perspective, really everything moving touchless. So we've seen this technology exists. I think a number of I saw a number of things where China has gone basically fully touchless in a number of their buildings. So we're starting to see more demand on touchless access, touchless elevators, touchless payment, all of those things. So when we think about the time frame, this really is region by region. We've seen different states and different cities are obviously going to be a little bit more aggressive about how they open up and how they welcome people back to work. Some other states where the COVID outbreaks have been more serious, they're obviously going to go a little bit slower. So when we think about rollout, it depends on really, whether you're looking for a white labeled application that is the brand of the landlord or the property, or if it's going to be delivered in the HQO app. So if it is a white label, we have to set you up in the Apple App Store, which requires a certain approval process. But within the first 4 weeks, we can get the communication technology, which is the most pressing, ready and rolled out. Weeks 5 to 8, we can get commerce set up. This does require ultimately integrating and onboarding retailers, so there is a little bit more of a lead time needed there. Similar time frame for integrating with any sort of access control solution. But if you already have Openpath, that can be done a lot faster than other systems. So a little plug there for James. From a launch perspective, we typically look at 8 to 12 weeks. We used to do all physical launches where we had a team dedicated going to the properties. We have been doing purely digital launches. We've had a number of our landlord properties roll out digitally even while people are not at the building, so they can develop a communication channel with a greater percent of the employee population. So we've done 4 or 5 digital only launches while most of the folks are not going back to those buildings. And we're, one of the things that we're starting to figure out is how we get back to physical launches and what the time frame is, but we don't really have clarity on that quite yet. And we do, as buildings come back online, we've seen more demand for certain services within the application tied to health and wellness. So we have begun conversations with a number of telehealth partners, certain partners that can deliver resources like additional masks, gloves, things like that. And then finally, when we get past the first 90 days, we start to do QBRs and meetings with the executive teams and the asset management team to determine strategy, which has always been our practice, but it certainly looks a little bit different. And we're doing these on a more frequent basis now during COVID. Pricing for our platform starts at basic 5 cents per square foot annually. And depending on the number of integrations that you need across a number of different categories, as well as the type of support you need from a service perspective. So our tenant experience team has 2 components. We have tenant experience content and programming, so updating the application, helping with content, and working with the retailers and service providers to get activated in the application, as well as a solutions architecture team that will help you vet and procure technologies, like many of the good technologies here in this group, by category. So we encourage folks that are a little bit light on bandwidth to vet third-party technologies that touch the consumer and the customer, to work with our solutions architecture group to help vet those.
Well, that's great.
Hey, Chase, can I just jump in, James? I just got a quick one for Chase. So we had this amazing webinar earlier today, Chase, focused on landlords, and we had Chandra, CTO of CIO of CBRE. And the thing that they kept reinforcing over and over again was the importance of communication, particularly as it relates to the tenants and their employees. And I think about HQO and your peers and what have you. And we meaning me, we used labels too much, and we would think of you as sort of like tenant experience. And today, clearly, and Ginny Miller was talking about it from Oxford, and I think she's one of your customers. It's such a larger story. It's about really a platform and a portal that you're doing, right, at HQO. Do you think that you're starting to rethink the way that you categorize what you're doing? Because clearly, it's so much more than experience, and it's even so much more than a communication.
Yeah, I mean, the way we think about tenant experience is it's not even necessarily purely tied to software. It's every single touch point of an experience that a potential employer or tenant has with your property. That's both physical in the real world, but also digital when they're not at the property. So when you have different visitor management systems, communication systems, that all plays into the holistic tenant experience. And one of the things where we have been bucketed into the tenant experience category. Our strategy has always been to be a underlying platform that enables a whole suite of applications that are relevant to a person at a property, so that there's a saying that in technology there are only two opportunities, either bundling or unbundling, and we very much view the landscape and ecosystem of point solutions that touch the consumer experience. There are too many point solutions chasing too few problems, and there needs to be a platform that brings them together in a coherent way for the consumer experience, and also on the back end, simplifying the property team's workflows so that they can manage more things that truly deliver the full ROI of a good tenant experience in one place. And really what it's about is getting all that data, right? A piece of data, one-off data here or there on what people are doing is not helpful. You really need the 360-degree view of how they use your property. So, we don't like to use the term operating system too early before you have a kernel and the services that need to sit on top of it. But I think that's ultimately what the market has been looking for.
Real quick, I push out a poll to everyone listening, so if you guys could just fill that out, that would be great. And then I just want to make sure to flag some of the other questions that have come up. So I think, one of the questions that came up was, CapEx versus OpEx, how do building owners offset some of these costs? And, do we think that owners will just increase the management fees or leverage other strategies? So I'm curious what folks, think about that in terms of, how does this all get paid for? And open to anyone's feedback on the phone there.
Yeah, I can speak from Density's perspective. So the majority of our business historically has been with end tenants who want to access the data for themselves. We are seeing a shift, or at least more landlords and owner operators becoming more interested in how they could provide this as a value add to their clients, right? So in the current context, it might look something like managing that lobby or those shared spaces, ensuring that they're safe, that they're cleaned appropriately. So using people count data to do deep cleaning based on how often the space is used rather than a schedule. And things like, shared amenities are also a value add to the tenant experience. So when gyms do reopen, understanding when the gym is busy or a good time to go to the gym, those types of value adds, potentially serving that data either on a display or in an app like HQO. And then just specific for Density, our pricing, when companies do scale out and when they do go across their entire portfolio, they're volume-based discounts and things that we can unlock for specific deals. So that's just something I would mention.
One of the polls is showing, the poll results are showing that, people think that basically the cost should be equally kind of split between the tenants and the landlords in terms of who pays for a lot of these, improvements to make the, workplace safer. And I think that's, probably feels fair. I think that, the challenge probably we're running into is that the landlords today aren't getting paid rent by a lot of the tenants. And they probably have some lender challenges that they're looking at. So they might be a little reluctant to put as much money into the buildings right now, given that, situation. But we're coming to the end of the hour here, and I wanted to, thank everybody for their contribution. This has been really great practical takeaways and advice from all of these experts. Their contact information is available here. Please feel free to reach out across any of the disciplines. And folks, thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, James, I just got to thank you once again for your great leadership in organizing this really important, timely, critical webinar. And the feedback that we've been getting at CREtech is these webinars are some of the best ones that we're doing. And it's really all the credit's due to you. So thank you for all that you're doing to show people that there's a way forward, there's a path forward, and here are some of the tips and suggestions. And great job, all panelists. So thrilled that CREtech's been a part of it. So thanks, James.
We'll have another one next week on Thursday, so look forward to it. It'll be an interesting conversation about who pays for all this. So with that, thanks everybody, and be healthy.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.